Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
All right, got a lot of stuff to get through today. There was a Nintendo Direct this week, a lot of announcements there. So we're going to be we're not going to talk about everything, but we're going to plow through the things that I felt were pertinent. We want to talk about the Final Fantasy 15 Ardyn Prologue anime a little bit, and then move into our main topic, which is about fantasy as a genre of fiction. What is the point of it? Is there any point to it? Is it just pure escapism? And then, of course, we have a couple community stories we'll get into as well. So, you watched the Nintendo Direct this week, Kason?
I did. I watched it, although I missed a really important thing, apparently.
Yes, you did. Probably the most important thing for you missed.
I had to watch it in two separate goes. I watched it live for a little bit, and then I had to stop because I had work to do. And then I tried to pick up back where I left off and watch the rest of it. But apparently I didn't go right where I left off.
Okay, so we're going to blast through it. There's only really a couple things. You know, a lot of people were upset by this one, I saw. I think it had like 20 or 25% dislike ratio.
This
on
Direct?
on Nintendo's channel.
Why?
I think a lot of people are becoming a bit entitled with Directs, expecting to see certain things that they really want to see. But despite the fact that there was some really weird stuff in this one that I was kind of like, what? There still were a couple of really great announcements that to me made it a super great Direct.
And this isn't for the whole year. This is just up until like E3. And then after E3, we're going to have even more announcements. It's like, this isn't like if people are upset that there wasn't any Pokemon or anything, it's like that's coming later this year.
Yeah. So, Super Mario Maker 2, I enjoyed Mario Maker for what it was for a little bit. But
Mario Maker was great, yeah.
It was huge on YouTube. Lots of people doing making levels and trying out other people's levels, so that'll be huge on the Switch, I think. Yeah, the thing that was a really weird announcement to me was Smash Ultimate 3.0 update.
Yeah, they just did the 2.0, didn't they?
Well, not only that, but they didn't even say what it was. Like, what's the point of putting it in Direct? It's saying 3.0's coming. You find out what it's going to be a little bit later.
They seem to like tie it into the Persona 5 Joker guy, where it's like, 2.0 we got the Piranha Plant, 3.0 we're going to get Joker, but it's like that's its own DLC. So what's the update? That's weird.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't know what the point of putting that in Direct is if you're not going to say much of anything about it. Okay, here's a big one though. Link's Awakening remake.
Yeah, that's huge, actually.
I'm going to put this on the screen. Why don't you tell me what you thought of this first?
Oh, first off, I thought it was freaking awesome. I'm a huge fan of when Nintendo goes kind of like basically creates an entirely new art style out of, any of their IPs and makes it just like super unique. And that's something that they've done here with Link's Awakening. When you're remaking a really, really old game, this is like the third ever Zelda game or something like that. I can't remember. Was this before Link's to the Past or was this after the Link
Before Link to the Past.
This is before. So this is like the third ever Zelda game. It's on the Game Boy. Really, really low resolution, right? Really, really poor image quality. And so how do you remake that, right? And they could just do it in the vein of like Minish Cap or something like that. But I'm glad that they actually are kind of altering the look of the game to fit more with kind of the feel of the game, I guess. And I think it's really cool. They got this tilt shift thing going on. It looks like you're controlling these little plastic toys. And I think it's really super cool. A lot of people were expecting a Skyward Sword HD remaster, though. And I doubt we're going to get both of these this year. So that one we'll probably have to wait a little bit on. But I actually am really excited to play Link's Awakening. I haven't played that game in like 20 years.
I'm not sure if we'll get a Skyward Sword HD remaster.
You think so?
Because how are you gonna do the sword mechanics on a Switch?
Well, the Switch has the.
Well, I guess it has. I guess that's true. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah. I totally forgot that feature because I've never freaking used it.
I know because they never use it, but it technically that's the thing. The Wii U, you'd have had to have actually used a Wii controller, which is weird. But for the Switch, you can do that.
I can't believe I literally completely forgot that the Switch has that capability because
I know because you always use the Pro controller. But I only know it because whenever we play Mario Party, it's like they use that thing all the time.
Okay, hold on. So here's my thoughts on this. I do not like. Well, I'll say what I like first. I like the little intro they did. The
That
art
was cool.
style, the
Yeah.
art style in the intro, and then like especially on this sort of like page where they do the title of the game, and they show the mountain in the background with the egg, and he's
Yep.
like knocked out on a little
Yeah.
board in the ocean or whatever. That art style, I love.
That was cool.
I wish that was what the game looked like.
Well, but that's a 2D hand-drawn cartoon. You can't possibly do that.
Well, no, you certainly can. The way that using techniques like that were used in what's that freaking game? That latest
Dragon Ball Z, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
so,
those are all 3D.
Yeah, it's really smooth and stuff. But you know that
stuff.
that animation that they were doing there, how it was all like crayon drawn, and it seemed to be colored in just a really interesting way, not the way it's.
I know.
And
I know
the frame rate was probably about 8 frames per second.
Yeah, I still think that there are ways that they could have pulled that off, because that to me is what looked really interesting and like new, and it was pretty faithful to the what do you call it? The way that
manga,
they did the intro in the Game Boy game, right? Because like
yeah.
In the Game Boy game, they have just kind of like 2D images that aren't really animated much.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, where it's just the image and the camera's kind of moving a little.
Yeah, and this kind of created some motion to it. Yeah. Anyways, I think there are techniques they could have used to pull that off, and that I would have really
if they
loved.
hadn't shown that, would you then have liked the art style?
No.
No?
I don't. I'm not a big fan of this like little plastic model-y looking thing. I don't think that it's. It's not that it's bad or that it looks bad. Like for what they were going for the purpose of what they were trying to create, for their intention, they pulled off something that looks really polished. I just don't like it as much as I would have liked something more like this. I have it on the screen. I know you can't see it, but
I got you.
Like if they had tried to pull off something like this, even if they had done it from the top-down view and kept the game the same way, which I would have preferred, the way that maybe like A Link Between Worlds is done, and the way that this is done. So you keep that classic 2D Zelda gameplay feel to it.
Right.
Sure.
They kind of had to do that for this one.
Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted them to try and make it into a like 3D Ocarina of Time and After style Zelda game. I wouldn't have wanted that.
Right.
But something that feels more like a 2D cartoon than like this tilt-shift 3D plastic thing. Another thing I didn't love about it, because like some of my favorite music from the Zelda series comes from Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
And they had this, I don't know how to describe it other than like, the stupid like flutes that they do in a lot of parodies, like that Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Where it's played badly on purpose, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like that genre, but not played badly, but played in tune and played well.
Well, it sounds like it's being played with like toy instruments. For some reason, they're going with this like toy theme for this whole game. Like everything looks like it's a toy. You're hearing the sounds of like cheap toy instruments, being played well, I guess. Instead of, what I think this group worked on previous to this was A Link Between Worlds, right? And I think that was the Zelda that, like, this is obviously the handheld Zelda team trying to make a Switch game now, with HD and all that stuff. And looking at the Link Between Worlds graphics, it's like, that's super cool. I probably would have preferred that if they just ported that over. But I love it when Nintendo does new stuff. And this, like, I don't know, I feel like the gameplay is going to complement this look that they went for really well.
Probably true.
Because it's just going to be a fun game with crazy stuff in it. And
anyways, not really too drawn to it myself. I probably won't play that one. I will probably go back and replay the original, though, because I freaking love that. I love that Game Boy version of the game a lot.
They have that on the Super NES Classic, by the way.
Do they have...
Can you play Link's Awakening on the Super NES Classic?
Did they have that as part of that? What was that game called? Like,
the Game Boy Collection or whatever.
Maybe.
I haven't checked it yet, but if it's there, that's how I'm going to play it.
I don't know how emulatable that game is. You have to look into that.
Yeah.
But possibly true. Okay. Let's move on to... this was just something really quick. The internet is so freaking weird. Remember how when we first watched the reveal for, I think it was ARMS?
Yeah.
and we thought it was like stupid. And then like the internet just freaking like wanted more arms all the
Well,
time.
Splatoon also. That's how Splatoon
Yeah,
was
Splatoon
revealed.
was the
And it was
same
like,
way.
what? And it ended up being a really fun game.
This Tetris 99 thing
Yeah.
became a meme so fast, and people were just like, more Tetris 99. And I think this is more of a joke than the others were. I think people were more legitimately excited for those.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a joke of this because people were looking for Metroid. They were looking. I don't know why anyone was looking for Metroid. They already announced it was completely restarting like last month or whatever. But anyways, people wanted other things, and they were trying to make it out like, oh, we want these things, but Nintendo gives us Tetris 99, which I thought was not even true because there were so many good reveals outside of that. But anyways, Tetris 99 became a meme somehow. I don't get the internet sometimes. Yeah. Assassin's Creed 3 remaster, I'm just asking why. Like,
I know,
why,
3?
why?
People like, why? What in the world?
Why that one? Of all the Assassin's Creeds, why 3? I don't know.
And that
it just
one
seems
actually
like a
did
weird
come
choice.
to the Wii U, so that's part of it. I don't know.
I think actually the one that was on Wii U was 4, was Black Flag.
Oh, was it 4?
I don't think 3 came to the Wii U. So that's even weirder. I don't know. It's weird. It's a really old Assassin's Creed that they're remastering on the Switch for some reason. Okay, Fire Emblem Three Houses. I'll talk a little bit about this one.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people also expressing disappointment or concern about this one. And I'm cautiously optimistic for it. It does feel, especially with the voice acting, I don't understand like the genre of voice acting for anime. It's like a very distinct way that people talk, and it's very overdone. And we've touched on this. Maybe has something to do with the fact that theater in Japan is often not going for realism. That's not its point. It's trying to be like over the top, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe they're trying to sort of keep that essence of the acting into the localization or something like that. And I respect that choice if that's why they're doing it, but it just, anime voice acting very often doesn't feel natural. So it doesn't feel natural to me here either. But the premise of it, I think, is kind of cool. Where you create a character who is a tactician and an instructor, and you're going to choose to mentor one of the 3 leaders of the 3 kingdoms and sort of like teach them at an academy setting. They have in the past had the player character act as the tactician for the army, which makes sense since you're making all the choices.
Yeah.
But there's only 2 that I can think of that I've played anyways where they did that. One was Fire Emblem on the Game Boy, where your player character didn't fight at all. They were just the tactician that they came to what do you call it, counsel with or whatever. And that seems to be what this is. I'm watching it now just to make sure that I didn't miss something, but it seems like the player character just like gives commands and not necessarily fights, which was how Awakening was. In Awakening, you were the tactician for the army, but you also were a magician and a sorcerer. You fought. Anyways, we'll see if I'm right or wrong about that, but I really like kind of the style they're going for here, which looks a bit more like the previous console entries of Fire Emblem in terms of proportions of the characters on the maps, rather than like a little chibi dude, 2D dude that they've had since Awakening, basically.
Right.
So there's elements of it that to me look really cool. I like how the units, when you send a unit into battle, it'll zoom in on the map, and that unit will actually be like a whole platoon of guys. So like on the wide angle, like bird's eye view, it's like one person, but when they fight, it zooms in and it's actually like a whole regiment or like an entire like group of people. So it makes the army feel a lot bigger.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I like that. I think that they're executing the look really well, like the art style that they have for the portraits, and then like applying that to the 3D models. They have like a nice outline on it to give it, a congruent look with the anime sort of like art style. Anyways, let me see here if we can get into the part where they're fighting, and if... Yeah, see, like these battles from up top, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Path of Radiance. But yeah, and then it zooms in and it's like they have like a whole platoon or like a bunch of soldiers that each unit is kind of in charge of. But I don't know. I think this looks great. I'm excited for it.
Hmm.
But of course, with how disappointing Fates was and the direction they've been taking storytelling since then. Like Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, of course, is a remake of Fire Emblem 2, basically. And that one I liked better. There were some things about it, like mission structure. I don't want to go too long on this. Anyways, if anyone wants to know what I didn't like about Shadows of Valentia, hit me up on Discord. But I liked it better than Fates for sure, but I still didn't feel like it was like one of my favorite games in the series. Anyways, I think it looks cool. I'm excited for that.
Cool. It does look cool,
cautiously.
but I'm just not into Fire Emblem as much.
Okay, we talked about Hellblade coming to the Switch. I'm a little bit upset about this because I wanted to buy a physical copy of Hellblade because I wanted to support the team. It's one of my favorite games. I'll always play the PC version if I'm at home, but when they announced the PlayStation 3 physical copy, I went and bought it because I wanted to support the devs. And then they announced a Switch version, which I would have rather had just for the portability, functionality of it. Because I'm not going to play the PlayStation 3 version, I'm going to play the PC version. I just bought it to support them. So now I feel like almost enticed to buy
a third.
so that I can take it with me when I'm traveling. Anyways.
This was surprising. I did not think Nintendo was going to get this one.
Yeah, it's a cool announcement. If you haven't played it and you have a Switch, I recommend getting it. Super good. And if you're going to play it on the go too, you're encouraged to play the game with headphones anyways. So it's a better experience with headphones. Much better experience with headphones. Okay, Deltarune is a game coming from the creator of Undertale. I loved Undertale, so I'm excited about that one. Didn't really see too much. It was a pretty short trailer. Final Fantasy IX was released.
Yep, it's out now.
Already out. And Final Fantasy VII is coming at the end of March. Yeah. I'm hearing some not good things about Final Fantasy IX's port on the Switch.
Yeah.
It being laggy, the people hating the UI, like the menus and stuff, because they look like a mobile menu.
I was wondering if this was a mobile port, yeah. Wow.
And so it seems to have similar problems that I had with like Chrono Trigger's original release.
Yeah, but that was fixed quickly, which makes me wonder. Hopefully, Nintendo can approve a patch quickly here.
Hopefully. But speaking of this, I told you earlier in the week, this isn't the case right now, I don't think, but for a couple days, the Sony PlayStation Classic was $40 on Amazon. So I went and got it.
Oh, nice. Good work.
So I'm going to be that's how I'm going to be playing Final Fantasy 9 or 7 or 8 into the future.
Sure, that's how I would much rather play. Yeah. Just get the original and play it on something like that.
Mod it and have the original controller and anyways. So I probably won't get either of those on the Switch. Especially if they're not as good as the PlayStation versions, which has been the case forever. The PC versions of Final Fantasy 7 and 8 were really bad back when they released them in like the late 90s. And like all the ports basically since then are not great. The PlayStation version is just the better version of the game. Just play that one, right? Okay, now here's the big one. Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition. Now this is freaking my favorite thing that we saw from the Nintendo Direct. Let me play it here. And there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, I mean, the Switch version's finally coming. And people had to wait a long time for this if you want to play it on Switch. But this is how you do it. If you're going to make your people wait forever,
you better put something in it that they can't get otherwise.
This is what you do. You release the definitive version of the game on your platform if you're going to make people wait that long to get it. And so you'll get the same version that you had on PlayStation 4 and PC and stuff. It's not going to obviously look as good as it did on those platforms, but it's still the HD version of the game.
Yeah.
But also, they're going to put in the orchestral soundtrack into this version that you can switch on the fly. That was not in the PlayStation 4 version. That was not in the PC version. Well, you could mod it on the PC version. Which
I'd heard that people had done that.
But the real huge key, and this was true for I think both you and Landon, because you wanted the 3DS versions. I think both of you did.
Exactly. Yep.
Because you could switch on the fly between the 3D and the 2D version of the game, right? And we're talking about how that more or less like made it so you guys weren't interested in it anymore. But now the Switch version will have 2D that you can switch on the fly. They brought that feature back.
Yeah, that's freaking huge for me specifically, because that's literally like how I wanted to play. Once I saw that the demake was even an option, I was like, that's how I am playing this game. And it was so disappointing that the 3DS didn't come here. But the fact that it's on the Switch is cool. And I don't know, I'm almost wondering if this kind of stuff can be patched over to the PS4 later. Like if eventually, this version of the game can be played on the different platforms as well.
Well, that was the first thing I looked up, was like, oh, it's a definitive edition. Is that going to come to the PlayStation 4? Or are they going to release this version elsewhere? And I can't see anything that's saying that. So one thing that I found was that Nintendo is the publisher of this version of the game.
Yeah, that's right.
Square
that's
Enix.
Huge.
Square Enix is not publishing it, which leads me to believe it may be exclusive to the Nintendo Switch.
Nintendo knows what their people want. That's pretty cool.
So if that is the case, or, it could be, maybe it's a limited, or for a limited time, it's an exclusive, kind of like Resident Evil 4 was. Or
Yeah.
But in any case, I have this version, I have this game.
I have it on Steam.
PC, yeah.
Yeah, I have the PC
so it's
version.
like, I don't know if I'm going to, but I'm kind of tempted to buy it because I just love the concept of switching on the fly to 2D, and I feel like Final Fantasy 16 must do it. They must. It's such a good idea.
I think I am going to get it for the Switch. I do have a question though. When you get into a cutscene, does it play the cinematic cutscene, or does it do the cutscene in the 16-bit graphics?
I don't know for sure, but I think it would be 16-bit. I don't think that they'll play cutscenes.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. Anyways, as Anvil's saying Final Fantasy 16 won't do it, calling it out. And he's right, of course. But I don't see how for either Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest moving forward forever, how they could not make this a staple feature.
They should. They really should.
They started this genre, and they have such a history, and people loved the 2D games. Just do it. Just do it forever. Just do it from now on.
And they're having such a hard time, branching, moving forward, progressing the genre, but still maintaining their roots. They are clearly having a really hard time with that. This is one way that they can just have it both ways. And I don't think it's that much more expensive to include a demake of your game in the content. I don't think it's that much more. It would maybe take a few more programmers, but not that much.
I agree. Anyways, looks awesome. And I will strongly consider getting the Switch version, since I haven't even played that far into the one I have.
You haven't?
No.
I've heard such good things. I just haven't. I haven't wanted to play it.
Good. It's just so intimidatingly long. It's one of those games where it's you're gonna have to play it 100 hours, and it's just like, do I have time for that? Anyways, let's move on to
that's huge.
This article real quick. This is an interview, or not necessarily an interview. A question was asked of Naoki Yoshida, Naoki Yoshida, who is the director of Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. And he says something that I think a lot of us agree with, and what would make me hope so freaking hard that he would be the director of the next mainline.
Well, a lot of people are speculating that he is going to be.
I really hope he is.
We'll see.
So I'll just read what it says here. Considering that 3 of the 4 previously announced Final Fantasy XV DLC, Episode Aranea, Episode Lunafreya, and Episode Noctis have been canceled, and only one of them will actually be finished, Episode Ardyn, coming in March, it's safe to say that Square Enix has decided to abandon the 2016 JRPG to focus on Final Fantasy VII Remake and yet unannounced project developed by Luminous Productions. Right. According to Final Fantasy XIV director and producer Naoki Yoshida, next entries in the acclaimed series should be a straightforward fantasy that don't have much machinery and with no mecha in them, as he revealed in a recent interview with Siliconera.
See, what is he doing talking about this at all? His producers wouldn't want him saying any of this unless he was somehow involved in the project. You
I
can't
don't
get
know.
away with just saying stuff like this
Well,
with your company. These are
he
these
has
are discussions you have in private.
he has been pretty openly critical of Square in the past.
Has
Like
he? Okay,
one
well,
of one of my one
I
of my
could be
favorite
wrong.
quotes from him was where he said, "We had an unhealthy obsession with graphical quality in this company, basically." Like,
Well,
and he had that attitude going into fixing Final Fantasy 14.
oh, good.
So I think that to some degree he feels he has some room to be openly critical of the company because he basically completely rescued Final Fantasy 14 and
Yeah.
made it profitable.
Well, in that sense, then that may be true. Maybe they just let him say whatever, and there's no repercussions.
It goes on to say, as you probably remember, Final Fantasy 15 director Hajime Tabata officially parted ways with Square Enix, in November to publish or to establish his own development studio called JP Games. And so he's definitely not involved in any new Final Fantasy titles. We know that Luminous, the developer founded to focus entirely on new Final Fantasy, is working on a new title. I don't think that's actually true. I think they were working on a totally original game, but
No, that's what I'd heard.
is working on a new title, so there's a chance that Yoshida, the man who quite literally saved FF14, is overseeing a mechaless Final Fantasy video game that might as well be the next-gen project at that point. I hope that is true. I
That would be
desperately
awesome.
hope that is true. That is
Yeah, that
one
would
way
be-
that you could get me really excited for Final Fantasy 16.
I mean, they haven't had that kind. I guess. Well, even Final Fantasy 12 had a lot of the big mech kind of stuff in it. Not really the mechs, I guess, but just the technology aspect was still ever present, despite the fact that it felt more like a traditional fantasy.
Sure.
You got these big flying spaceships and stuff, and not spaceships, but the airships. But they weren't
look like
normal
spaceships,
airships.
though.
They looked like
Yeah.
they had some like technological basis.
Yeah. Anyways, that'd be sick. I hope that's
I think it's been since 11.
I would love to see just a straight, like, medieval fantasy setting for Final Fantasy again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want it to be an MMO, however.
All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about this Ardyn Prologue anime that they just released basically like yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet then.
So I watched it, and I'll just say that, like, everyone knows my position on Final Fantasy 15. You know that I've been cynical of it. I've been really disappointed by it, especially with its storytelling. Like, it's not so much the story and like all the ideas of it. It's the way that they delivered this over a gigantic freaking like multimedia. You have to like watch a movie and like 2 different animes and like play this game that's like a freaking like arcade beat 'em up, and in order to like get like a complete view and a bunch of paid DLC for pieces of the story that are quite like necessary, I feel, right? And just the storytelling in general, even with all of that in mind, I think it's just missing so much good context and setup to make the payoffs really work. So, anyways, I watched this, and when we were first starting out on YouTube and we were trying to decide like what's the appropriate length for like a YouTube video or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And eventually we kind of landed, I don't remember who it was, whether it was Freddie W or somebody. They said something like the video should be as long as the story or the idea, as long as the idea dictates it should be, right?
Sure, that was
Like,
Freddie, yeah.
If the video needs to be 12 minutes long in order to be executed right and to do it the right way, then it needs to be 12 minutes. You shouldn't try to arbitrarily cut it down to 3 if that's not going to deliver on the idea, and vice versa. If it's a 3-minute idea, make it a 3-minute idea. Don't try and like extend it and make it longer than that.
Right.
This story that they're telling in the anime is like an hour-long idea that is 12 minutes long.
Well, great.
And this is what I was hoping when I heard that they were doing an Ardyn DLC. This is the time period I was hoping that game would take place in, when Ardyn was the hero of the story and was going around like blessing people and taking the Star Scourge into himself. And, I thought that that's what they were going to do. But turns out that's not the case. They're going to do something that's like, I don't know, 20, maybe 50 years before Final Fantasy 15 starts. After all this interesting stuff for the character, all of the possible nuance for the character, and establishing why he's become a villain. His justification for that. They try to wrap up that whole story in like 12 minutes. And it's executed fairly well for the most part. I mean, the animation's decent. For anime is usually, animations are pretty like low frame rate, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for what it is, I think it's executed really well. It's flashy, it looks good. Sound and music are on point. Like, these things are all done pretty well. It's just that I don't feel much for the characters in it because they're really rushing through it just to give you like the main bullet points of what happened, rather than like having moments to like really help us understand the characters, feel for them. Like, so it's fine. It's like, okay. But again, like, it kind of wraps up my whole problem. Like, it is essentially like a 12-minute version of my entire problem with Final Fantasy 15 storytelling. I don't understand or feel like I connect with any of the characters, despite the fact that I can see horrible things happening to them, tragic things, and it's like, oh, that's really sad. But it's the equivalent of me hearing about some random person on the news. And I don't have any context for the life. I had no connection to that person, so I don't feel anything other than like a base level of sympathy. Like, oh, that's a horrible story. I feel bad for them. But I don't really feel that, you know what I mean? Because I don't know these people. So, anyways, it's worth watching, but like, they're trying to make this so sad. Like what I have on the screen here right now. It's like so tragic, and it's like the tone and the heaviness of it is there, but I don't feel it because it's, like I said, it's like an hour-long idea wrapped up in 12 minutes. So, anyways, those are my thoughts on episode Ardyn Prologue. The DLC will be coming out next month.
Yeah, I didn't know it was out. I want to watch it now.
You should totally watch it.
Does it look like it was done by the same guys who did the Brotherhood?
Yeah, looks like exactly the same.
Cool.
Art style and stuff like that. So, okay. Let's move on to our main topic. Oh, nice. We have 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Wrap that up in 30 minutes. Here we go. This one came from Chocolate Rob on Patreon. Asks, what is the point of fantasy fiction? It's all just a load of stuff that isn't real, right? So obviously he doesn't believe this. He's just posing the question.
It's a very good question, though. It's something that makes you think a little bit.
Do you have thoughts on that before?
I do. I absolutely do. So, fantasy fiction. Well, I don't know exactly how deep I should go, and I could be. A lot of this stuff I would take as stuff that resonates with humans just resonates with humans, and that's just how humans are. But there is a psychological aspect you can take to this whole thing, and that is that fantasy has its roots in religion, going back really far, and that humans have this connection to the perceived supernatural in a way that they don't really understand. And it does definitely, I believe it goes back to religion, but it also, fantasy fiction is an extremely good way of presenting an abstraction in an engaging way in order to teach a moral, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got a dragon. There's a dragon, lives off the shores from here. It comes around and it kills people and it hoards all this gold. And, once upon a time, there was this really brave guy who went out and fought the dragon. He went and confronted the dragon, and his reward was a ton of gold. The dragon, for some reason, had this young virgin girl also, and he's got the girl too. And he comes back to the town, and wow, everybody loves him now. He saved everybody, and he got everything he wanted, right? And it all resulted from one man's bravery going out and confronting the unknown, essentially. And so that story, from a moral perspective, is telling individuals to face the challenges that are ahead of them, despite how big they are, to go out and to discover yourself, or to go and discover the world, to confront the darkness that's in front of you, and to, fight the demons that are ever present, and all of this kind of stuff. Right. And the dragon being the abstraction of the most evil possible monstrous thing that you could ever face, being still slayable by a human who can then obtain the riches of the world, is kind of the kind of story that humans just kind of really gravitate towards, right? Because it's in their control. It's just something that's you can't even imagine how awful it would be to be in the presence of a dragon. Yet even still, anything that humans confront, humans have the capability of, getting over that and that whole kind of thing. And so you use fantasy in order to tell a story that you could just tell normally, like in terms of the religion stuff. Like you got the Adam and Eve story, you got the snake, right? Mm-hmm. And the snake is Satan. And you could just say, yeah, there's like an evilness inside of people. And when evil people behave evilly, you can kind of equate them to other evil people. And, there's kind of a similar spirit between this evil person and this evil person. They both kind of want the same thing. They're motivated in the same way. They lack empathy. It's like there's a spirit that's possessed them, right? So you pull out of these two people a similar spirit that you then personify using a snake, because snakes slither about, and humans are really good at identifying snakes as something that's going to kill them. And so, okay, well, the snakes must harbor that same spirit, right? So anyways, the whole abstraction just it becomes this story that's much bigger than it is, but it's used in order to make an impression on humans, in order to resonate with us and to help us to teach the morals and the ideas of how to live a good life and what you should and should not do, lest these things happen. Humans just have this connection with that kind of stuff. Even if they've never seen it before, they understand it, because it's like this huge, massive dragon. Oh my gosh, a dragon. That's basically a snake with wings. Holy crap, what could be worse? It breathes fire. Oh my gosh, fire's destructive. It's destroyed everybody's, it destroyed our last village because it got out of hand and we couldn't control it. Or the people who raid our villages, they use fire, right? So a fire-breathing dragon. Holy cow, that's the worst thing that can ever happen to humans. And anyways, that's about as much as I can bring out of that. A fantasy is much more than just telling fake stories. There's a purpose to it, and it ends up typically engaging with the way that the human mind works in order to convey a moral message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Ever since I was a really young kid, I want to say my mom sat me in front of The Neverending Story when I was maybe 5 years old or 4 years old or something like that. And ever since then, basically, there's something about fantasy fiction that has always, for me, been like my favorite genre, my favorite kind of style or setting for storytelling. And, as Rob asked this question, because he asked it earlier in the week on one of our YouTube videos as well, I've been thinking about that because, there is an element to the question that I think a lot of people, even in the comments here, are saying, that they have experienced from authority figures in their life, whether it's their parents, maybe like teachers, politicians, whatever it might be, that have this sort of like negative view toward escapism in entertainment when it comes to video games or movies. Like, I remember growing up and my mom was really concerned about how much time we spent with entertainment. The idea of
games and movies, yeah.
The idea of it being addictive and trying to escape from the real world and run away from problems and run away from responsibility and just like spend all of our time in this fake place, right? And so I think that there is a legitimate concern there. I think that there are people out there who certainly use video games and movies for that purpose, to escape from their problems, and it becomes an addiction. Right. But really, it's true of anything. That can be true of food. People use food to escape. They use food to console themselves, and it gets out of hand, and they become addicted, and they ruin their health. It's true for video games. I was watching an episode of it's actually one of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Oh, nice.
From season 1, I forget the name of the episode, but there's this really bookwormy, nerdy guy. Who
Yes,
works as
this
bank
this
teller.
is one of the most famous episodes. Yeah.
And he just loves to read. He's always reading, and he's got his boss at his work is like, you got to stop reading when you're on the job, or else you're gonna get fired. You're gonna have a job anymore.
Well,
and
his
like,
wife is like,
yes.
stop reading, but she's hiding all his books, and
he's like, I can't read at home because my wife won't let me read. Like she and there was a certain thing she said about the poetry he was reading. So he had hidden a book of poetry in the sofa,
in the couch. Yeah.
And she came and takes the newspaper from him and like, I'm not going to have my husband not substituting reading for real conversation. It was basically like exactly what people say about social media today, what they say about cell phones. It's like we're all just here looking at our phones.
Book, which today is considered the best form of entertainment that won't melt your brain.
This problem is not exclusive to modern technology. They've been making these same types of arguments even back into the 50s and 40s, and I'm sure well beyond that.
Oh, way before
you're not socializing with real people. You're not making real connections. You got your face stuck in that newspaper or stuck in that book or whatever it is, right? And you're just escaping from reality into that thing. Anyway, so she takes that from him. He takes out the hidden book of poetry, but opens it up and it's all marked out. She took like a pencil or a pen to it and like scribbled out like every single page, right? And she's just a horrible person and just like won't let him read for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
But anyways, the reason I bring that up is because like that's been a concern that a lot of people have had about entertainment for as long as entertainment has existed in whatever form and whatever media it came. And I've definitely like it's hard for me because like I gravitated toward fantasy as a young kid, but I have never felt like I used it for escapism. Like I've always had more of like an appreciation for the art of stories and especially with fantasy, there's so much room there for incredible design to create things that we don't see in the real world, but like what would happen. It's this ability to ask questions and put people into situations that you could never find in the real world. I call it hyper realistic scenarios. Because we try to make them appear real, like say the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm in Lord of the Rings, right? That looks real.
Yeah.
Right? It feels like believable. You look at that and it's obviously that's a creature that would never exist in real life, but when you're watching that, you believe that. Because the way that they study animation, the movement of like different types of beasts and stuff, the way that they bring
the sound
that
it made.
to, like,
remember they were recording the cinder blocks to get that sound. Yeah.
So
well done.
So to me, fiction, and especially fantasy fiction is not about being realistic, but about being hyper realistic. We want to put ourselves, and this kind of goes back to the stint I was on for a while. Remember a couple months back, I was talking about recognizing patterns all the time. Yeah. I'm gonna come back to that for a second, right? So pattern recognition is like essentially what makes us human. I mean, again, some people will bring up, well, all kinds of animals can recognize patterns. Yes, that is true. I'm not saying that we're the only ones who can do it, and that's exclusively makes us who we are. I'm saying that our ability for it is like just way, way, way beyond any other animal on this planet. It's not even comparable. And because we have developed such a strong ability to recognize patterns in everything, we have learned to sort of, as a species, use that to try and apply meaning to the world around us, like find purpose in the world, like why things happen. We're always concerned with why. We're always trying to find out why. This applies to sports analysis. I've talked about reading all the stats and trying to make predictions about what's going to happen. Right? Yeah. It's very important to us to be able to predict based on the patterns we see around us, because biologically, from an evolutionary perspective, the better you are at doing that, the easier time you'll have surviving. If you can predict when bad things will happen and avoid them, you're going to survive longer. If you can predict, if you can predict accurately, you're going to have a better life. So, to me, entertainment, art, storytelling is about creating fictional scenarios in which we can learn without putting ourselves in any real danger.
Sure, yeah.
To learn pattern recognition. And that's why we get like formulas in storytelling, like the hero's journey and certain tropes and stuff. These are moral lessons.
Yeah. And I feel like that's also why a lot of villains and heroes are kind of the same from story to story. They're similar people. Like and it's in part so that, hey, if you see people doing these things, that's a bad person. This is a good person. And as much as that's black and white and they're trying to avoid that in modern storytelling, that is like at least in part, that's the usefulness of these kinds of stories.
Yeah, and we start it from a young age. You watch any children's television, the themes of friendship and sharing and forgiveness and all of these types of things are going to be at the moral of the episode you're watching. And it teaches kids to recognize patterns that will hopefully direct them to becoming a person who contributes to society and builds up a society and cohabitates and lives in peace alongside other people, right? So we inure our children from a young age to learn these patterns of living and these moral patterns through fictional scenarios. Obviously, freaking like all these cartoons you watched growing up, none of that was real. But is it important? Is Sesame Street important for kids? Sure.
My kid freaking loves it.
Like, it's not just mindless entertainment that you're sitting them in front of just to like get, sometimes you do it because you want them to be entertained for a while so you can go do something else.
Sure,
there's an element to that, but like, these media are important for shaping who we are as a society, who we are as individuals, and they teach us how to make good decisions. They teach us important moral lessons for our lives, and that is absolutely true of adult fantasy fiction, things like Lord of the Rings and Mistborn and all kinds of stuff. And I think that there's a tendency for people who don't want to look beneath the surface of it and say, like, stop wasting your time. None of this is real. I saw an interview with James Cameron, who was making some comments about Aquaman. Right, because Aquaman mostly takes place underneath, or a lot of it takes place underneath the ocean. Yeah, and he's a deep sea diver. It's why he wanted to make like Titanic. A lot of what he does is underwater filmmaking.
Yeah, well, he has been to the bottom of the Mariana Trench before. I think he's only one of like 6 people who've ever been that deep ever.
Right,
which is
and
crazy.
so he loves underwater filmmaking. And so he was commenting on the physics of it and how unrealistic it was, right?
Yeah.
And saying like, well, that's fine, like it was a good movie and they were doing what they were going to do, but like I couldn't have made that movie because of my knowledge of the physics of being underwater. And, Avatar, the new Avatar movies are going to largely take place underwater. And, we're going to be going for more of a realistic physics-based sort of like visuals in terms of how we go about making that, right? And what I saw in the comments was a lot, and I see this all over the place on the internet, but looking for realism in a fantasy movie, like like
I know people always say that,
and it's like, that's kind of the same attitude, but it comes from someone who's trying to defend a thing, right? Like you have some people who are trying to criticize something, being like, this is escapism. This isn't real. Stop putting so much of your time and energy into this. Participate in real life. There's like that angle, but then there's also the angle of, why are you trying to find something realistic in a fantasy? Like, that's stupid. Right. And to me, I think both are equally shallow-minded. And it's not about realism so much as it is about believability. You want to establish rules. You want your player or your viewer, your reader, to be immersed in the story. This goes back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago, something I actually wanted to touch on again when we talked about that developer from World of Warcraft who was saying, who's trying to distinguish a difference between immersion and good storytelling. As I thought about that later on in the week, I felt like that was such a misunderstanding of what storytelling is, because he's trying to delineate them as if they're different things. But to me, immersion is the result of good storytelling. It is not something that should be mutually exclusive. Like,
Yeah.
that is literally the whole point. You want people to believe in the drama. You need them to be immersed. And if you're doing all of the other things right, your storytelling methods, including your writing of your dialogue, pacing, your world building, if all of that's being done well, the result is the person will be immersed and they will believe in what's happening, right? So, yes, like, becoming immersed in something, which I think could be seen by someone as escapism. They make fun of Star Trek nerds in Galaxy Quest, right? There's the kid in Galaxy Quest who borderline believes that Galaxy Quest is real, and his heart is like crushed by Tim Allen.
Yeah, because they're
like,
actors. Yeah,
you realize it's not real, right? This is not real. And he's like, and he ends up calling him later when he late in the movie, after he's already in space and the adventure's already began. And he calls him on like a communicator. And he's like, listen, I know it's not real. Like, of course it's not real. No, listen to me. It's all real. It's like, I knew it. I knew it was real. I knew it was real, right? So you have, anyways, some people who are immersed to the point of, like, obviously that's a problem when you start believing it is actually literally real. And that's one thing. That's a very minuscule portion of anyone who, I don't think anyone believes like Lord of the Rings is real, but they're so immersed in it that they treat it with almost like more importance or priority in life than like any real problem, right?
Which is the religious connection there.
Sure. That exists, but I think that the amount of people who are at that point is so small, it's not really a problem.
It's all children. It is all children. But you're talking like the amount of adults at that level. Yes. That's true. It is smaller, as it should be. but for children, this is real, and it kind of needs to be real for them to internalize it properly, I think.
But anyways, but still, a certain level of immersion to the point where you could be seen as escaping into this place is really important for you to have the moral message or the theme of it delivered to you in a way that will impact you, where you'll go like, yes, like, that's really interesting thought or idea. I should think about that more in my own life, and you can sort of start applying it, right? Which is, again, the whole purpose of storytelling, is to learn from these dangerous scenarios without actually putting yourself in harm's way. It's like you're learning vicariously through the characters in the story. And I think that is incredibly important and is much more. It makes fantasy fiction about much more than just a bunch of stuff that isn't real and just pure escapism, and can be actually very valuable in our individual lives and in pop culture as well. So, anyways,
I agree with that.
Sweet. You gotta go. We got 7 more minutes.
Yeah, I've got a couple more minutes. I can hang around a little bit longer.
Let's burn through a couple of these community stories. Okay, first one. This comes from, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Symphonikev on Discord.
Sure.
He has an original composition. Sounds like an RPG piece of music, basically. It's really good. Link to this will be in the description on YouTube, and of course, as well as on the audio-only platforms. I'm going to play just a minute of it here, let you guys listen to it, but I thought it was really great.
Yeah, it's really good.
I like it a lot.
I love it.
Really nice full soundscape. Very well mixed. It's going to change a little bit here in a second. Just a couple more seconds. I want to get to when it changes beat a little bit here.
Yeah, it slows down and then it goes. Really, really cool.
Okay. Anyways, any of you game designers out there who are looking for someone to do music for you, hit this guy up. He's legit. He knows what he's doing. Links will be in the description. Great work. Symphonikev. I really, really liked it. Okay. Last couple questions, and we're going to wrap up. This one comes from Mitch McDonough. What classic or forgotten RPG series would you like to see updated or reimagined? I feel like Skies of Arcadia deserves another shot. Okay, I don't know about any forgotten ones, but I have a list of like 3 or 4 that I think could really use remakes. Vagrant Story. Done in the style of Dark Souls, I think would be perfect.
Oh yeah, that would fit really well, actually. Yeah,
be perfect for the modern age.
Like a puzzly Dark Souls.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Xenogears being remade with the second disc having the time and resources put into it to finish it the way that they wanted to do that, I think would be amazing. And Final Fantasy VIII, actually, of all the Final Fantasy games that I think deserves a remake, I think 8 does, because they could flesh out some of the mechanics that were easily broken, or and I know some people like that aspect of FF8. They like that you can break it and sort of like tailor the difficulty to however you want to play the game. I get that, but it'd be cool if they sort of took away some of that and introduced a little bit more of an organic challenge rather than you sort of like creating or tailoring your own challenge to FF8. Yeah. Fixing some of the problems, I think, with the mechanics. So those 3 are what I would pick.
They probably should have done like a remake of Final Fantasy VIII before Final Fantasy VII.
I think so.
Like, do something to kind of make sure that you can do it right and that it's well received before you use your biggest name, you know? Mm-hmm. I would say Secret of Mana, though. I want to see the original CD, like the bigger version of that game, like the original version before they had to condense it to fit on a Super NES cartridge.
Get the whole thing rather than the remake they did last year or whatever.
Yeah, I know they did a remake, but they didn't include all that stuff that I wanted. Yeah.
Okay, this one comes from Daniel Imperial. What do you think makes for an effective opening to a story? For me, it's all about mystery. I think that the best way to hook someone in the beginning is about introducing a mystery. And what that is more or less a promise. So you're making a promise with your opening scenario about an interesting premise that they'll go, okay, I want to know more about this.
Final Fantasy 12 did a very good job of that.
Yeah. So if you can, I think Vagrant Story does a good job of it too.
No, Vagrant Story does a great job.
Its opening scenario like makes you go like, what is Leomond? Who is what is Molenkamp? Like, what's this power that Sydney has? There's all these questions at the end of that first scene.
Yep.
And that, to me, is the most effective way to hook somebody where they go, I've got to keep going because I need to know what happens, right? Okay, this one comes from Christopher Kowalchuk as the final question for today. Do you ever think about the possible harm caused by video games? I'll read the remainder of his comment. As a high school teacher who also enjoys video games, I'm somewhat concerned about my students who play video games at the expense of sleeping well, doing homework, socializing, exercising, etc. I'm only in my 30s, so I grew up at a time when playing video games was a normal pastime. However, back then we had to get together to play multiplayer. We would meet at the arcade as well and play more advanced games. But now that video games are ubiquitous to the point that you can play advanced games on your phone, I'm worried that the addictive potential of video games is magnified. And yes, I went through a brief phase of playing mobile games. Curious as to what you guys think.
I mean, obviously anything can be, harmful depending on how it's done or depending on if you do it too much or whatever, or especially if it's coming at the expense of sleep. I know a lot of students, especially high school students, they like sleep is hard to come by when you're in high school. But video games are also really important because they teach you things and it's a way of, kind of exploring a new world. It's a way of fostering imagination and a way of, a different way for them to kind of engage with a unique world. I see both sides of it. I'm glad. I thought he was going to go in the direction of the video games cause kids to shoot people in real life kind of thing.
Be more violent. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I don't know if there's much of an argument to be made there, but in terms of, getting kids out, obviously it's not helping kids become more social. I would say it's clearly that is not happening, but that's not all at the feet of video games. That's just how the whole world is becoming. And that's social media. There's all sorts of reasons for that. And video games, in my opinion, is probably at the bottom of the concern tree.
Yeah, I think, again, we sort of touched on this earlier too, like with the whole Twilight Zone episode and stuff like that. Like that, this kind of thing's been a concern for a really long time for all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
People, especially people who are introverted, just tend to recluse. They tend to go inward rather than outward. And it can be concerning if that person's not taught. And to me, this falls on parenting way more than it falls on any single influence, whether it's social media or video games or anything like that. Parents have got to watch this, and they've got to teach their kids how to reach balance in their lives. Because literally anything can become addictive. You could become addicted to watching sports or even playing sports. You could become addicted to just like focusing purely on one thing. And you need balance in your life. So it is important to make sure your kids understand that at an early age. They've got to find balance. They can't just escape into a single thing and just like get away from their problems by using video games or food or drugs or alcohol or whatever it may be. They can't just run away. If they're running away from something and escaping into whatever it is, that's bad no matter what it is. And certainly with smartphones comes the tendency to the ease of access to just escape. But as long as you're monitoring that, you're watching your kids, and teaching them how to balance their lives, they're going to be okay. Like this is not the problem. This is not the root cause. This is just the, what do you call it? The acting out. It's the, I forget the psychological term, but it's just the result. But it's not the root issue. The root issue is that the kid doesn't have confidence, doesn't feel like they're good enough or lovable or whatever it is. And that's what needs to be addressed in order for that child to have the confidence to find balance in their lives. So don't go after the result, go after the cause is
sure. There you
go. Should be how you approach that.
Yep.
Okay. We're done for today.
I gotta go.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate you guys. We got a subscription from Bieberman. Thank you very much.
And from Riker's Beard.
And Riker's Beard as well. Thank you for subscribing. We'll see you guys again very soon. Have a great week next week, and peace out.
Peace.